Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're digging into, well, a bit of a paleontological head-scratcher. The dinosaur Amtosaurus.
Yeah, it's a fascinating one.
We're piecing this together mostly from the Wikipedia page on Amtosaurus, which pulls together the scientific papers pretty well.
It does. And our goal really is to figure out why this dinosaur's identity has been so debated, so up in the air.
Exactly. It's a story about how science works, with messy evidence.
It really is. Think of it like a cold case, but millions of years colder. And our clues are these tiny fragments of skull.
Okay, so the starting point is this. Amtosaurus. It pops up in Mongolia, right? Discovered back in '75 by a Soviet Mongolian team.
That's right. And the initial thought, it was an ankylosaur.
Ah, yes, the ankylosaurs. For anyone needing a quick reminder, those are the super armored dinosaurs built like tanks, sometimes with that big tail club.
Nature's battle tanks, basically.
Yeah.
So this expedition found two partial brain cases.
Brain cases, so the skull part protecting the brain.
Exactly. From ankylosaurs. They found these in the Bion Shire Formation in Mongolia.
And that dates back to the late Cretaceous.
Yep, late Cretaceous. Specifically, Cenomanian to Santonian age. So roughly maybe 90 to 86 million years ago. Pretty late in the game for dinosaurs.
Okay, so two brain cases. What happens next?
Well, in 1978, a couple of Soviet paleontologists, Kurzanov and Tumanova, they described them.
Right.
One seemed to fit with a known dinosaur, Talururus plicatus, but the other one, that one was different.
The one from the Amped Guy site.
That's the one. They decided it was something new, and they called it Amtosaurus magnus.
Amtosaurus magnus. Okay, so what's in the name?
Well, Amtosaurus just refers to the place, Amped Guy, and magnus. That's just Latin for
A
large.
large lizard from Amped Guy.
Got it.
Yeah.
Pretty straightforward, but, the discovery itself was actually quite significant.
Oh, so?
Because it was the first decent look anyone had gotten at the skull region of ankylosaurs since Sylvosaurus back in 1960.
Wow, nearly 2 decades. So this was a big step in understanding these armored guys.
Definitely. Initially, they thought, okay, Amtosaurus seems pretty similar to Talururus. Makes sense, right? Same general time, same place.
But there were differences.
Yeah, small differences. Specifically in the occiput, that's the back part of the skull.
Ah, the occiput. Right.
Those differences, even if subtle, were enough for Kurzanov and Tumanova to say, okay, this is a new species.
And that's where things stood for a while. But then, Uzbekistan.
Precisely. Fast forward about 20 years to 1998. There's this big international project, Uzbek, Russian, British, American, Canadian scientists.
Wow, quite the team.
Yeah, and they find another ankylosaur brain case, this time in the Bisekti Formation in Uzbekistan.
Which is a slightly different age.
We'll get younger, yeah. Turonian deconiation. And this find was important.
Because it was diagnostic. I remember seeing that term.
Exactly. It means the fossil had clear, recognizable features you could use to properly identify it and, crucially, compare it to other finds.
Like the original Amtosaurus.
Right. This new brain case, ZIM-PH116, gave them something solid to work with from that formation.
So who described this new Uzbek find?
That was Alexander Varianov, a Russian paleontologist. In 2002, he looked at this brain case and decided it also belonged to Amtosaurus.
So a second species.
Yep. He named it Amtosaurus archibaldi.
After the project leader, Archibald.
You got it, J. David Archibald. And Varianov had this idea, this interpretation.
What was that?
He thought Amtosaurus, now with 2 species under its belt, might be like an intermediate genus, a link between the earlier ankylosaurids and the later ones.
Ah, like a stepping stone in their evolution.
That was the thinking. It seemed plausible at the time.
Okay, but then the plot thickens again, doesn't it? This is where things get really messy.
Oh, yeah. Just 2 years later, 2004, entered Joylon Parrish and Paul Barrett, 2 British paleontologists.
And they decided to take another look at both Amtosaurus species.
They did. And their conclusions, well, they really threw a spanner in the works, especially for the original Amtosaurus magnus.
What did they find? Or maybe, what didn't they find?
That's the key. They looked closely at that original Mongolian brain case, A. magnus, and concluded it actually lacked clear diagnostic features.
Lacked features. To identify it as an ankylosaur.
Exactly. Or even really any specific dinosaur group. The features just weren't unique enough, weren't informative enough when they looked again.
Whoa. So the dinosaur that the whole genus was named after might not even be what they thought it was.
That was the implication. There was even some suggestion, maybe it had links to hadrosaurs.
The duck-billed dinosaurs. Really?
Yeah, the idea was floated, but Parrish and Barrett were cautious. They said, well, there aren't really any clear brain case features linking it to hadrosaurs either.
So where did that leave Amtosaurus magnus?
Kind of in limbo. Their final verdict was nomen dubium within Ornithischia, basically an indeterminate ornithischian.
Okay, break that down. Ornithischian just means it's one of the big plant-eating groups, right? Like bird-hip dinosaurs.
Correct. It tells you it's a herbivore in that broad category, but beyond that, too incomplete to say. Indeterminate. It's like finding a single bolt. It's from some machine, but which one? Impossible to tell.
So the original Amtosaurus is basically a question mark now. A dinosaurian John Doe.
Pretty much. A very fragmentary one.
Okay, so what about the second species, the Uzbek one, Amtosaurus archibaldi? Did Parrish and Varick cast out on that one too?
Well, yes and no. They agreed that A. archibaldi, that Uzbek brain case, it definitely did have clear ankylosaur features.
Ah, so it was an armored dinosaur.
Unquestionably.
Yeah.
But they found it didn't quite fit neatly into either of the main ankylosaur families.
The ankylosaur, the ones often with the tail clubs, or the Polycanthidae, the spikier ones.
Right. It had ankylosaur traits, but not the specific combination to confidently place it in ankylosauridae, or what was then considered Polycanthidae. It was distinct.
So clearly an ankylosaur, but its own thing. What did they do with it then? It couldn't stay an Amtosaurus if the type species A. magnus was now dubious.
Exactly. You can't have a genus based on an indeterminate type species. So since A. archibaldi was clearly a distinct ankylosaur based on diagnostic features.
They gave it its own genus.
They did. They moved it out of Amtosaurus and established a new genus for it, Bisectopelta.
Bisectopelta, named after the Bisecti Formation where it was found.
You got it. So Amtosaurus archibaldi became Bisectopelta archibaldi, a valid ankylosaur, just not Amtosaurus.
Wow. Okay, let's just walk through that again. We start with Amtosaurus magnus, thought to be an ankylosaur. Then A. archibaldi gets added, seeming to confirm Amtosaurus of this intermediate type.
Right.
But then, oops, A. magnus turns out to be too fragmentary, maybe not even an ankylosaur for sure, becomes indeterminate.
A dubious name, scientifically speaking.
And A. archibaldi is definitely an ankylosaur, but different enough to get its own genus, Bisectopelta.
That's the whole twisting journey in a nutshell. It's a fantastic example of the scientific process in action.
It really highlights the challenges, doesn't it? Working with such incomplete pieces.
Absolutely. A single skull fragment can lead you down one path, but then another discovery, or just a fresh look with maybe new techniques or comparative fossils, it can completely change the picture.
And it underlines how important those diagnostic features are, those unique characteristics.
They're critical. Without them, you're just guessing. A. magnus lacked them, so it ended up in that uncertain state. Bisectopelta had them, so it could be established as its own valid thing.
It's also wild that the two species initially lumped together turned out to be so different. One completely uncertain, the other a distinct ankylosaur.
It really shows you how careful paleontologists have to be and how much interpretation is involved, especially with limited material. Initial ideas aren't always the final word.
So for us listening, trying to grasp this tangled story, what's the main takeaway?
I think it's that our picture of the past, especially the deep past, is constantly being refined. The dinosaur family tree isn't set in stone.
It's more like a sketch that keeps getting redrawn.
Exactly. New finds, new analyses, they force us to reconsider old ideas. It's science correcting itself, refining itself based on evidence. It can be messy, but that's how we learn.
Yeah, definitely not a straight line from discovery to understanding.
Okay.
Okay, so we've gone from Amtosaurus, the Mongolian ankylosaur, to Amtosaurus, the maybe not an ankylosaur, and seen its potential second species become Bisectopelta, the Uzbek ankylosaur.
A perfect illustration of paleontology in progress.
For sure. So here's something to think about. How many other dinosaurs that we think we know pretty well? How many might actually be based on similarly shaky or incomplete foundations? What happens when we find more evidence? Could other well-known names face a similar identity crisis? It makes you wonder about the nature of certainty when dealing with fragments scattered across millions of years. What does it really tell us about the limits and the triumphs of piecing together life's history?